Okay, it is 3:15 and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. We have a quorum that is present, and so I will call the meeting to order. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. The minutes have been circulated, and if there are no corrections or additions, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
Motion to approve.
For a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It carries unanimously. The correspondence is with respect to a subsequent request from Mariah Mitchell, which is in your packet. After I wrote to Jason and indicated that the research that I was able to do based on the information that we found, we didn't believe that it fit within the scope. She has done additional research into the material that she had delivered to us and indicates, has a request here that she believes that the additional work that they have been doing can fit within the definition of the award that we gave with respect to the archiving of all the material. And so it is up to this board to make a determination as to whether or not that we're in agreement with respect to that, and if so, to let her proceed with that work and apply the additional funds left to do that, or make a determination that your conclusion is that it does not fit within the scope of the grant. So I would ask that I hear from this committee in terms of their thought process with respect to this.
So they want to take money from the 2005 grant and apply it to the most recent one that we...
No, what they're saying is the work that they are doing right now fits within the scope of what the 2005 grant contemplated, but it is a different technology now than what was available at that point in time. And so the letter suggests that that doing it through a different means of technology fits within the scope of the grant that was made to be doing this work under a different type of technology. So,
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. I think if I read this correctly, and I stand to be corrected, but this looks to me like they want to, with the balance remaining, they want to purchase the equipment to be able to do it. And I don't think that's how the original grant was.
I'm sure that I misunderstood. My discussion with her was different, but if that's for a purchase of something, I don't think that fits within the scope.
Well, I stand to be corrected, but
no, but I'm saying that, yeah.
The equipment purchase would continue, and I think that's outside of the scope of...
Cost of purchasing, okay.
I do see that, and maybe there's clarification, but it does say that the equipment purchase would continue to be used after the scanning of the archive is complete. So if it isn't a purchase, it is confusing in the way they state it in the letter.
Well, it says the CPC monies would cover the cost of purchasing the equipment necessary to complete the project and cover the costs associated with the hiring of individuals to process the scanning of the archive.
Well, I believe I don't have a problem with the new technology being used for the same purpose to preserve.
Yeah.
Tim raises a good point with the purchasing of equipment. If that's outside the scope with the purchase of things, then we have to consider that. If there's not a purchase of it, I would say it does fall in the scope. So maybe, I don't know if this is what the board would like to hear, but maybe we'd have to continue again until the next meeting instead of voting on something that we really didn't know for clarification purposes.
I'd like to think about it.
I'd like to see it continue. I think the program is very important.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, make a motion to continue, unless there's further
If
discussion.
you agree to, because there's no one that, who's the,
Dawn.
oh, okay, Dawn's the project manager, okay. So the motion is to have the project manager go back to Ryan Mitchell to get clarification with respect to what the funds are being used for.
Yeah, I think also with clarification to the applicant that if it falls within if it falls within the purchase of equipment, that doesn't necessarily go to the scope of
Yeah,
what we're looking for.
because the equipment that would have been mentioned in 2005, clearly the equipment today didn't exist at that point in time, so.
Well, and
And what about staffing? That's not salary,
that's what I
is
was
it?
just gonna raise.
No,
They
it's
can't
not. Yeah,
hire people to do it. I mean,
No.
that's outside of the scope.
yeah.
I think we should, honestly, we're coming right down to the end of the season. If we were to reject this and have them put a new application in, the money that, the 32,000 would revert back to fund balance. They could put a new application in, and then the new application would be clear. I'm not saying that we
Yeah.
would approve it, but I suspect we
Mhm.
would. And then in September, we could approve it and they'd be off and running again.
And the only reason why I would suggest continuing it, because if there was clarification and we did get it where we thought it was within the scope, then we can approve it at the next meeting and then the funds would be available right away, instead of waiting until
Yeah.
September
Whole year.
with the new application. So if we found out that there was clarification, we didn't approve it next meeting, then they still could submit, I believe, for the September. So,
Yeah. Okay, is that your motion?
yeah, that's my original motion,
Second.
yes.
Second, Andrea. Any further discussion on it? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous.
May I, before we leave that, Mr. Chairman? Could we have, for our next meeting, the original request from '05 or whenever it was, so that we could look at the original language, so when we vote, we can,
Yeah, I will ask Glenn to circulate that right away. Yeah.
because it would be helpful just to
Yeah,
see.
no, the material, there's not a lot of material there, and I went through it, and I couldn't make it work. I really wanted to, but I couldn't make it work in terms of the language. So, but I really want you guys to have that, because I really struggled with what this request was and what the request was in 2005.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Next item on the agenda are the fund requisitions. There are only 3, and I would entertain a motion to approve those.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
For a second,
Second.
any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. There's no old business, but there are 3 items of new business. There is, with respect to the Sachem's Path project, there is an amount of $13,000 some odd dollars that if we agree, will be coming back to us to go into be reallocated out for affordable housing. This is a very confusing situation. The thing is that what we did was at that point in time, generally we reimbursed them for funds that were expended, but at some point in time, they got some funds that were held in trust and earned interest on it over the period of time, or they were able to negotiate better deals than the original contracts. So there was an amount somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 that was left available to be more than they had when they thought they had closed out the project, because they didn't have all the numbers. Now, there's $25,000 of it that is to go to the town for the sewer connection coming out of that. There were additional things that come out of it that seem appropriate, and the balance was something in the area of over $13,000 that would come back to us, which would then go into designated reserves for affordable housing in the future. And we have worked this through, and I've gone over it with Tucker any number of times, and I think that is the right thing for us to do in terms of the way that they have proposed to dispose of that money. If the timing had been right, that it would have never occurred, because it would have been done before they ended up closing it out, but they had to close it out on an estimated basis. So there was ending up a little bit more money than they thought that they would have. So it's my recommendation that we go forward and accept the return of the monies and they go into the designated reserves for affordable housing to be allocated in the future.
Before we vote on that, Mr. Chairman, I seem to recall that Satcham's Path received a waiver of all sewer fees. And therefore, why would, if I'm right, and
The thing is that
if I'm right, the 25,000 shouldn't.
well, the thing is that the sewer department did waive it, but said if there was any money left, that it would go back to, so this money's coming, basically this money's coming back from HAC to the town in terms of the sewer fees. So the fact is that while they waived it, they're now getting the money back in terms of.
So this pot of 60,000 is coming out of a sewer line item?
No, it came out of the overall budget that they had.
So how does it get from that overall to sewer?
Well, this was the proposal that HAC has discussed with various people in the town in terms of how to deal with it, in terms of making everybody whole relative to the project, because there was some additional monies above what HAC felt was right for them to have in terms of their contract to do the project.
Geez, we were the lion's share of funding for that project. Seems like it should come back to us, but I'm.
Well,
That's my
the thing is
opinion.
that the homeowners association has agreed to be able to give it to the town with respect to David Gray, so.
That strikes me as an odd way for that. I just don't know how you get from A to B with them in the middle. That's all I'm saying.
Because then the town's actually getting paid, reimbursed from CPC funds for the sewer. Is that what you mean?
No, I guess what I'm saying is I'd rather have that money to be used for other housing projects rather than sewer projects.
Okay.
I mean, don't let me derail.
The problem is that this has been almost 2 years in negotiation to try and get
But
this.
why does it have to be negotiated? Why?
Well, because of the fact that
It seems like it should come back here automatic.
the fact is that
If there was a conditional waiver.
no, but the fact that, Tim, the fact is that not all of the money that was involved in Satcham's Path came from us,
I understand.
okay?
Lion's share is what I said.
Well, with respect to the, I think that we were maybe about 50%, the state was a major contributor with respect to it. And so the discussions have been done with respect to where this $60,000 or $65,000 should go. And I think none of it's going back to the state, the rest of it's going back to elements within the local community.
Okay.
You guys decide what you want to do. My recommendation is that I think that under all of the circumstances and all of the things that time's been spent on trying to figure out how to get this thing done, this is a good solution with respect to it. It was monies that, in a sense, I don't think we have a legal right to get back because of the fact that they ended up spending less than they thought they were going to be able to spend on the project. And everything that we gave them, and the money we gave them, we got receipts for. In terms of, we paid them monies based on receipts and monies that they had expended.
But the issue at hand right now is, just simply put, do we want to allocate the 13,000 plus back into our funds? So we're not really dealing with 65,000 or 50,000, even though I understand what you're getting at, Tim, and I agree. Unless there was a conditional waiver put on, that 25 should have been waived. But where we are right now, the issue at point is really just focusing on the 13 plus, and unless we're going to go back to the drawing board and create something that, or pose an obstacle to start all over again for the reallocation of the 65,000, I kind of agree with our chairperson where we should, it's too complicated with the 50%, is what we put in, and I think we should take that money and run.
Well, let me just say this. Let me just have
Yeah.
a closing comment. So if we're a 50% contributor to the project, what was the total cost, Ken? 3 million?
No,
Something
it
like-
was
Higher than that.
higher than that. It was closer to $4 million.
So theoretically, if we're a 50% contributor, to be getting back less than 30% of the money seems like,
Well, but it went to stuff within the community. I mean, it went to the town, it went to, you know, so the thing is that they didn't go to the state.
right. 25 went to the sewer department that way.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you get my point.
No,
I don't know why this has to be difficult. It seems like the whole 60 should have come here, but.
Or at least 32.5.
Who are the other agencies? 25 to sewer, 13, so that's 40, there's another 20 going somewhere.
Yeah.
No.
I just-
7,500 went for plantings, 3,300 went to housing assistance appropriation. And
Oh, so some of this has already been spent, is what you're saying? The plantings,
that's right, yeah. So
Well,
the only cash that's not left around
is the 13,000?
again, is what we're looking to vote. And I think, you know, looking at the scope, as long as that money was used for the project, it's gone there, spent, we don't have it, it's not being given back. So really, the issue at point is, what are we doing with the remaining $13,000
Right.
plus?
Well,
I
that's
would
what's
say
hard to figure out
yes.
at the first.
Well,
Right.
what I'm trying to do is try and very inelegantly explain that this is a very complicated process. That is very unusual because of the fact that virtually ever, almost never do you have somebody say that we spent a little bit less than we thought we were going to spend.
Oh, well. We just had a project where there's 32,000 potentially coming back. I mean, there's leftover money in grants all the time. But I take your point, Mr. Chairman. There's a little more to it than I was able to read. And it sounds like we can't renegotiate because it sounds like it's already spent.
Yeah.
Well,
With that, unless somebody else, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to reallocate the $13,000 plus back into the CPC and deposit that
Under the
affordable,
Affordable housing?
affordable housing
Affordable.
designated reserve fund.
thank you, affordable housing designated.
I'll
reserve.
second it, I guess.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
Mr. Chairman, on that note, were you part of the equation on that? Or did you just said there's 13 left?
The discussion was carried on with Tucker, who was acting on behalf of the town's interest in terms of the housing.
And Glenn, I'm just curious, we don't have sanctions pass on our big, like, you know, these are spreadsheet for everybody, but they're not on here? Am I losing my mind?
What year is that from?
Say again?
What year is that from?
Oh, 21.
They didn't come to us this year.
Okay, so this is only for this year?
Correct.
It's not the whole,
Correct.
okay.
Back.
The signage that, next item on the agenda is a draft sign that Ryan Mitchell and Linda came back to us. A call from Linda indicating that she thought that we should change it to, at the bottom, the Community Preservation Committee. And we can leave the CPA, which is the initiative for this Community Preservation Act, but perhaps in the middle have it be Community Preservation Committee. And the same thing at the bottom, replace the word act with committee.
This is going where?
This is going to be at the new park.
At the new park?
Yeah, and it's going to be, and it's going to be perhaps a sort of standard that we have for everybody, because everybody's supposed to put up a sign on their project.
Right.
That's partially funded by.
So, I don't know why they don't have committee, community preservation committee.
This was developed by the group in Boston, and they're implementing the Community Preservation Act. We are the Community Preservation Committee under the Community Preservation Act.
Right.
So
Perhaps, I think the C committee is better than the act because a lot of people don't
They don't
know
know what.
what the act is.
well, that's the reason for the discussion. That's what came up. So
Yeah, I don't put it in the
what I
bottom.
want to do is have you tell me what changes will get made. We'll have them make it. We'll review it one more time, and then this can be the sort of the staple that we have other organizations do on their property with respect to projects that we funded.
Well, I would like to propose we strike the word "the" after "through" and add two words, a grant from, I guess I want to add the local Community Preservation Committee. So it would read, this project is funded in part by the citizens of Nantucket through a grant from the local Community Preservation Committee.
Okay. And what do we want to have up on top?
I wonder if is this sign going to be displayed throughout other projects around the Commonwealth?
Yeah, well, the fact is that every community has the right to put whatever they want in terms of creating the awareness of the community preservation. The people in Boston just created this as a benchmark in terms of what you can use or how you want to set it up.
And I only say that because the CPA really identifies the overall funding from the entire Commonwealth,
Yeah.
and then the subcategory with the definition below that states where the Community Preservation Committee has enacted to get the funding for this particular project. So I'm not opposed to the top being the CPA, because that is where the initial money is coming from through all the different towns and counties.
Right.
Yeah, as long as we delineate the next line, to really explain to the public that it is local, it's their money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would never get, the CPA could never get money for that project. It has to go through the local duly
Right,
elected.
yeah. So,
But I think that's identified when you use the word Nantucket in the paragraph below, because that
no, I like Tim's words, through a grant from the local community preservation committee.
I am 100%.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
My feeling is that I would almost get rid of the CPA, and I would just have Community Preservation Act across the top,
Yeah,
and then the text below, this project funded by the citizen through a grant from the local Community Preservation Committee.
I think it's more recognizable, and we're trying to have people recognize the fact that the CPC has done this.
yeah.
And to say, the thing that catches your eye is a CPA, and there aren't a lot of people really We know what CPA
Yeah,
is.
so the CPA doesn't really give any level of identification.
Right.
The Community Preservation Act does.
Yeah.
So
Take it out.
we'll move that up across the top,
Mhm.
and then we'll amend the text as suggested by him. Is that
Right.
right? Is everybody?
Yeah, that's
comfortable with
right.
I think that makes it a better thing.
To be honest with you, the CPA is confusing because people say, oh, the land banks account funded this. You know what I mean?
that? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, that sounds
And the bold letters of the CPA in the spelled out version will kind of indicate it's the
Yeah,
CPA as well.
we're just a little better.
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
And I was there yesterday, and there were at least 60 kids, because it was a school holiday.
It's always busy.
That is the
Way,
most
and
popular.
all ages,
Yeah.
all ages. And we had to drag the kids out after an hour and a half.
All right, can I have a motion to amend the sign minutes as we've agreed?
I make a motion.
Diane, okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. This is one I wanted to bring up to you today and have you think about it. The issue is, well, we have funded some work with respect to getting rid of the terrible weeds in the ponds, okay? And the next phase of this is the dredging aspect in terms of being able to get this stuff out. Now, when I talked to Stuart, Stuart said that this is sort of a gray area, and then what he did was he included the letter that the Department of Revenue sent, and I highlighted the yellow words on the front page and on the back page. And I just want to go over it because under certain circumstances, the eradication or control of weeds or other invasive plant species might qualify as preservation of open space. And here are the most critical words. If necessary to prevent harm to a water body. Now, it then goes on to say, your question whether dredging would be considered maintenance and therefore not an allowable preservation project. And then at the end, at the bottom of the page says, however, that dredging is not done regularly to keep the pond and surrounding lands in good condition, then we do not think it would be considered maintenance. So I think the issue is that that says that since they've never done it before, it's going to be a one-time activity, it's not maintenance, okay? So the question then comes, does it come within the definition of rehabilitation? And the answer is no, because of the fact that we didn't actually pay for the ponds in the first place. But it can come in the definition of preservation of open space. And you may recall, some of you who are on the committee, that we had to make a determination that with respect to the award that we made in My Comet Village, that the award was done in order to prevent harm to the building. So what I need you to think about is whether or not that in order to prevent harm to the water body, we in fact can approve the dredging so that in fact the water body can come back to life and get rid of the weeds and invasive species that are killing the water body. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to be comfortable with, because I think that within the language of this opinion, because we know that we've had town council's opinion before, that we can in fact, when we're doing something to make a specific definitive determination of preventing harm to a building, to a water body, that's legal for us to do. So whether or not, it seems to me that this is really important in terms of preserving the great ponds that we have here from the invasive species that have developed, and from the sludge that's on the bottom, from the invasive species that we can't get rid of. So I would like to have you think about this, and I'm going to put it on the agenda for next month's meeting to be able to make a determination as to how we want to proceed with this. Please, we can open it up for discussion, as long as we don't vote.
Yeah, just to add food for thought for the next meeting, just in our title, we are the Community Preservation Committee, preservation being important. Just reading this, the pond wasn't originally acquired or created, but what trumps that is the preservation of open space to prevent harm to the water body.
To my mind, that supersedes and allows us to be able to make a determination if we want to.
Just something else for the next meeting, I don't know if we need to put it on the agenda, but could we kind of get a status report on the field house? It's been a while since, I don't know if they put it out to bid, they had hired a designer or what, I just...
The funding, they requested additional funding for it in the warrant article, and it was discussed at FinCom that there is, that I think FinCom recommended the additional funding that would be necessary.
That's just for the drawings, am I right?
I don't know.
You know,
I didn't.
so I should look through the warrant?
Yeah, it's actually, who administers FinCom? There's got to be secretary of FinCom who would be able to direct you to the minutes of FinCom where that was discussed. It was discussed last week.
Okay, I can shoot her because I met with them myself, okay.
But it was talked about, I just happened to be there for something else.
Okay. Alrighty.
Jim, can I bring this up again, the water body question from Tisbury? So I remember when we did this with Bob Williams, right?
Yes, we did. We funded, but we couldn't, with Bob Williams, what we couldn't fund the mechanical equipment.
Right.
But we funded something. So we funded a fair amount of money for the initial testing.
Right.
And the chemical testing.
That's right.
Of the solvents that they were using with the stuff treated. And we did something else, but we were able to, and what happened is that as a result of all of that work, they discovered that what they're doing is working, and this is the next phase of the project in terms of being able to finally eradicate the invasive species in this location. And they're going to have to dredge to be able to do that.
And so we want to be proactive with regard to what came down to Tisbury to make sure we don't hit the same kind of letter?
Yeah, I'm not going to ask for a letter from DOR, because DOR sends a letter that says that they say you can do it if in fact you can make a determination that to do this is to prevent harm to the body of water. So as long as we make that determination, we're clearly within the guidelines that DOR has given CPCs in terms of the definition of preservation of a body of water. So, I thought this was very helpful in the sense that the concern is it maintenance in terms of, and then the beauty of it is since you haven't done it before, it's not maintenance, right? So then you go to the fact of is it rehabilitation, but you can't do it because you didn't buy it. But is it preservation? And you can be preserving the pond if you're doing something in order to be able to save the pond. And that has to be a specific finding of the committee with respect to that. And so probably what I will do is I will reach out to Bob Williams and have him give me some help in terms of how this is actual things, words that we can use to show how this is saving the pond. Because I think this is really important for the pond.
Do we know? Oh, excuse me.
I was just wondering if we could, in essence, cherry pick a piece of a legal opinion out and use that without asking the question. But I'm
well, and the thing is that, I mean, We asked town council whether we can, whether we are entitled to make that kind of a finding
Yep.
with respect to the monies that we allocated from Hightown
Yep.
Village. And he said it's clearly within the scope of the,
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, that was the only way we could in fact make that kind of award
Yep.
with respect to Myconic Village. Because the circumstances are the same. We didn't pay for Myconic Village. And we're working to preserve a historic structure. And we can only do it
Right.
if the preservation is in because of the need to in fact save the health of the building.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
Yep.
Here we have, you know, that also you're asked 10 lawyers, the same
Yeah,
question.
no,
get 10
but you
opinions.
know, if the committee's uncomfortable, we have time. I can go to John, after you make that determination, I can go to John Giorgio and say, John, can you confirm that?
Oh, no, I don't know if I'm worried about that. I was just trying to, I'm an old Yankee, it takes me a little while to think through the concept that
Right.
you're using.
And I'm just a thought for the future. I'm not necessarily opposed to the initial and the preventative
Mhm.
part, preservation.
Yeah.
But I'm curious from Bob, in his opinion, is this going to require maintenance later on? The dredging in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or,
Yeah,
or
that's
something
something-
like that?
Well, the thing is that, based on his opinion, if you only have to do it once every 20 years or so, that's not maintenance.
That's why
Right.
giving a little bit more substance to it. If he says, yeah, this is going to start, and then every 2 years we're going to need to do this, then that becomes a maintenance issue. And I'd really like to say, or hear from him that this is just the initial for
Right.
preventative medicine, and then we wouldn't have to deal with this for another 10 or 20 years. That would be really a nice,
Okay, so in my conversation, make note that I need to ask him about help with respect to,
Do we have another request then, Mr. Chairman,
No.
from them?
no, he and I have been talking about him wanting to put in a request for the September cycle.
Gotcha, okay.
And he
So
has
this
always-
isn't anything that we need for a pending grant?
No.
It's potential
And
grant.
it's a potential grant. He always works really well with us in advance
Yeah.
in terms of saying, you know, what do we have to do? How do we can we do this? And how do we qualify for it? If not, then he doesn't try and
Yep.
work something out. So I want to ask him what activities of the pond that we're saving, and B, what's the likelihood of the need to re-dredge? Is it every 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? So that
frequency.
the frequency of it. Yeah, so. Anything else that we want to have in terms of background information?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was really creative in terms of the initially email that I sent up to Stuart. Do you have a copy of that?
I remember that.
I can't get
Because we had a need, but we didn't have.
Yeah, the thing was, I'm just saying, how can we make this fit?
Yeah.
And so, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all that I have for today. I really appreciate everybody's time.
Oh.
And
And March
17.
17th.
Hey,
Where you green?
Tim, are you going to be providing the drinks for that day?
Gladly. Gladly. I move we meet at Fairgrounds. Must be some green beer over there.
Right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.